Hi there, welcome to the Carr Brothers. It's episode 97. I'm Jack.
And I'm Jeff.
And I'm Jody, the third of the three Carr Brothers. Welcome to the Carr Brothers Live tonight on Facebook and CHCO.
And we're very happy, aren't we, guys? Someone we grew up with.
Yes.
On all the news shows and special news events and things like that. A 45-year career in broadcasting, primarily on CTV. Throughout Atlantic. We're very, very pleased to have with us Steve Murphy. Thank you, Steve, for being with us.
Hard to be on this show, so I'm delighted that you made an exception for me.
We feel like you're part of the family, like many other Atlantic Canadian
Well,
families.
thanks.
So,
Thank you.
45 years, and we want to talk tonight about you have a new book that you've launched, which is going really, really great. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the Christmas Daddies. But you've been retired now from the anchor desk for how long?
It's almost 2 years, believe it or not. It's gone quickly by, but yeah, I'm glad you say I retired from the anchor desk.
Yes.
Because I say to people, you can retire from your job and not retire from life. And my idea was not to retire from life, but was really just to retire from the routine that came with anchoring the newscast. So I was glad to move away from that part of the work, but I'm very glad to be still involved with the commentaries, which I do on CTV every other week, and then with the other projects I'm doing now, most recently the book, of course.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, we're going to, when you did retire from the anchor desk a couple of years ago, there's an 11-minute, we're not going to play all 11 minutes, but there's an 11-minute highlight reel. And if our viewers haven't watched it yet, Google it. It's on the CTV website. But we're going to play a few minutes of that right now for our viewers.
Sorry guys, we gotta go to
Okay.
Christmas Daddies intro.
Oh, okay, no. But before we do that, we'd also like
Let's
to...
check in on the Christmas Daddies.
Good idea,
story.
Jeff.
Let's check that out before we go to the...
Okay, because Christmas Daddies is coming up, and we've got a 30-second promo of yourself, Steve, promoting this week's Christmas Daddies coming up. So we'll air that right now.
Yeah.
What are you up to, Steve?
Oh, hi, Katie. I'm just sitting here watching some old tapes from the old Christmas Daddies show.
These videos are amazing. When did you first get involved?
First got involved in 1980, but the Christmas Daddies show, the first one, 1964.
6 decades of helping maritime children. That's amazing.
Time sure flies.
It sure
The
does.
60th annual Christmas Daddies show, Saturday, December 2nd from 11 till 6 on CTV.
Please tune in and join us.
45-second tee up on the Christmas Daddies webpage and on Twitter and social media. And 60 years coming up this weekend, Steve, and you'll be a part of the program.
Involved in Christmas Daddies when I moved from New Brunswick to Nova Scotia in 1980. But like a lot of people in New Brunswick, guys, I watched the Christmas Daddies after it came to New Brunswick, which was, I think, in 1971, when CKCW TV in Moncton and CKLT in St. John became part of ATV. And of course, Christmas Daddies was such an essential part of the ATV brand that it came into New Brunswick, not to compete with the Empty Stocking Fund. And I'm asked this very often as somebody from St. John who, we grew up with the Empty Stocking Fund as well. But the idea was never to have the two compete. They were always working sort of, I guess, not cooperatively, but they were doing the same sort of work, raising money in different communities in the province. And by the way, I understand the Empty Stocking Fund is making a bit of a comeback this year, and we wish them very well. I think it's going to be the 10th of December, if I'm not mistaken, from Simon's High in St. John. But no, Christmas Daddies became part of my life as a viewer, and then I got to be involved in it beginning in the early 80s. And this is the 43rd time I've had the pleasure of being involved in it.
Wow, that's just that's remarkable. Remarkable. That's you mentioned time flies in 2 years, but 45, 43 years just goes by just like that. You still have a fair amount of hair there, Steve. You look really good, actually.
I probably have less than it appears. Television is very forgiving when it comes to like thin spots up there.
The thin. Wow.
So Christmas Daddies and the Empty Stocking Fund, over the years, especially recently, Steve, with the cost of living and things like that, are you seeing the amount of donations rise with that program or going down, or are they holding steady?
Yeah, I can't really speak for the Empty Stocking Fund, but I can say that the amount raised by Christmas Daddies tends to go up and down. It does sort of follow the economy. Some years when we're having particularly tough times, the money is down a little bit, or the money goes up a little bit, because I think there's a realization that there are more people who need the help. My sense of it this year is that the need is probably greater than it was last year or the year before because of the cost principally of food and also home heating, power, and so on. So I assume that the need will be greater. And I have a sense that there's a lot of fundraising going on, and we're also doing some new things, including a 50-50 raffle, which we run, one for New Brunswick, one for PEI, and one for Nova Scotia on the website at christmasdaddies.org. And half the money goes to the kids, and the other half, of course, goes to the lucky winner. But I do think that there's a good chance that we'll have a lot of need this year. And I also think there's probably a chance that the public's going to answer the need because, and I was asked about this in a couple of interviews I did today. Many people in the Maritimes know what it is like to be in need. So when they get to a point where maybe they've come through some tough times, they're very inclined to want to help, to give back. And I've heard that story from many, many people on a first-hand basis that, you were there for us, Christmas Daddies was there for us when we needed it. And now that we're able to help, we want to give back. So, yeah, we'll hope for the best. And we never ask for more than last year. We always say, do the best you can. Don't cause hardship for yourself. Don't give us money you haven't got. But, do the best you can, and we'll be grateful for that.
One thing I've noticed over the last couple of years when watching Christmas Daddies is that employee groups really seem to dig in hard and work hard at gathering donations in their workplaces and come on the show and present big checks. So I think that's important. I think you'll see that grow even more, I think, as time goes on, because Maritimers, they dig deep for other Maritimers, and it's really important, especially at Christmas time.
Well, statistically, we're among the most generous people in the country, even though there would be reasons to think, and you gentlemen know something about public policy, there'd be reasons to think, given some of our social and other problems in the Maritimes, that we might not be generous because we might not have the money. But the fact is we've had the experience and we have the desire and the willingness. And I think we are, probably punching over our weight when it comes to charity and generosity.
Well, you have impacted all of our lives in Atlantic Canada in particular, Steve, and there's a couple of comments on our Facebook page already. Wanda Grant from Minto says, Steve Murphy says, good evening, gentlemen. Steve Murphy is one of the best. Not just one exclamation mark, but 4 exclamation marks. And then
That's one for each of us.
Yeah. Yes, and you're kind. And Scott McGinnis says, Steve, we miss you. The news just isn't the same. So.
Well, thank you for those kind comments.
Yeah, that's nice to see. And then, so Christmas Daddies, we'll just sort of wrap on this, is this coming weekend.
Yeah, it's Saturday morning, 11 o'clock, 11 till 6 on CTV. We know a lot of people put up the tree or bake the cookies or, start wrapping the gifts or what have you. So it'll be 11 o'clock this Saturday morning.
Excellent. And people can tune in, and there's a lot of entertainers and entertainment from school kids all the way to Joan Kennedy, Matt Anderson, and Ivan Daigle and Jimmy the janitor. It's a great lineup of entertainers. So
yeah, no, it is. And by the way, that's what makes it so magical. For every big name entertainer we've got those school kids with the smiling faces and the sweet voices, and kids helping kids, which I think is the sweetest part of it.
Well, that's nice. That's great. We're going to we're talking about 45 years, the book Murphy's Logic as well. But in the meantime, what we're going to do is play that highlight reel, at least a few minutes of your career, Steve, and then we'll get back to some questions.
Okay.
And the forecast is for sunshine, some cloudy periods, and a high of 16 today. Cloudy tonight, the low near 10. Tomorrow, clouds again, the high 18. 11 degrees at just after 7:03.
And now the ATV Evening News, live at 5.
And we are in the heart of the Miramichi in the town of Chatham for the 4th annual edition of Canada's Irish Festival.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, from the World Trade and Convention Center in Halifax. The 21st Christmas Daddies. Steve Murphy at the auction desk, and the bids are coming in faster than we can keep up with them.
All kinds of people, 1,000, perhaps 1,500 people, are lining the street. We're going to have live pictures.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your support.
There he is, the leader of the Liberal Party, the Premier of New Brunswick, Premier-elect Frank McKenna. It is Old Home Week. A lot of racing is going on here. It's just like stepping into history. History as it might have been 125 years ago in Sherbrooke Village, Nova Scotia.
From the ATV News Center and every city and town in the Maritimes, Steve Murphy.
Live at 5 ATV.
welcome to Party Beach.
And according to the polls, you can't win one right now.
Which poll is that you're looking at?
Well, I don't know. I'm looking at a whole array of polls that seem to suggest your support is softer than it has been. I understand even your own polls suggest that. Sitting by the fire in a rocker here in the Morehouse house at King's Landing near Fredericton. He's joining us tonight from ATV in St. John's, but he just barely made it into the station. Howie, you're kind of looking thrown together tonight.
Is my microphone wire showing?
Yes, it is.
The guy wanted to hide it. Is it showing?
Yes, among other things.
Here I am in Newfoundland. This is amazing. The technology that they have in the 90s that I can be here in Newfoundland and talk to you wherever you are.
I think it's absolutely gorgeous now, and I want to come back in the summer and in the winter again.
Now, I'm surprised you're somebody from Southern California where it's probably about 75 degrees even right now, singing the praises of our nice, cool climate here.
It's great. It's beautiful.
We're going to have to get you working for tourism or something.
Hey, fresh air.
Yeah. Randy Travis joins us from the Halifax Metro Center where he's warming up for a concert tonight. It's a great pleasure to have you on the show. I'm a big fan. So
Well, thank you. It's great to be back again.
And it is one of many, many images of our very beautiful nation's capital that the whole world is seeing through the eyes of the media, here to cover the visit of Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev.
Happy.
Well, that's great. 45 years, it's only just a couple minutes of an 11-minute highlight reel. So the viewers, if you want to see, if you haven't seen it yet and you want to see that, just Google on CTV News Atlantic. It's right there on in Steve Murphy highlight reel. Wow, 45 years. And where did your broadcasting career begin, and how and why and all that?
Yeah, well, it began sort of by accident. I can tell you where it began. It began on 68 Carlton Street in St. John at CFPC Radio in April of 1977. I was a high school kid, 16 years old, and I wanted to be on the radio. So I managed to get an audition to go in and do a demo reel, as they're called. And Bob Lockhart, the great Bob Lockhart,
Yes.
who was the owners of the radio station and a friend of my family's, facilitated the audition. And I might say he probably facilitated the hire as well, because he was the boss. But no, I got hired by people who were willing to invest a little time to see if I had the right stuff. And believe me, at 16, I knew nothing about writing news. I was quite interested in news. I'd grown up listening to, As It Happens and watching Jack Pineo on CHSJ and watching Eric Sorensen in Moncton. I mean, I was a bit of a news hound, but I didn't know anything about the business of journalism. So everything I learned from people like Lockhart and the late, great Tom Young and Derek Chase, who was a venerable St. John newsman, remains a very good friend of mine. And the others who worked at CFPC, who taught me really by doing for me what others had done for them, which is yell and scream at them a lot and mark up the copy and tell them to do better. And that's how it began. But it was a bit of an accident in that I didn't really intend to launch a career. I wanted a weekend job on the radio. But it turned into the beginning of a long journey and a happy one.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, and we talked earlier before we came on air about the changes to journalism, the changes to politics, social media. What was some of your thoughts around politics in general, social media? But has things gotten worse, or is it just that I'm getting older and it just seems like it's getting worse? Or
no, not to be too hard on you, but maybe to be hard on all of us. It's probably a little bit of both. I think our view of it tends to change as we become more experienced, and you've had firsthand political experience. You've seen it from both sides. There's been a coarsening of all of the political discourse, not only in New Brunswick or in the Maritimes or in Canada, but in the world. And it's been really enabled by a couple of things. Social media has certainly amplified it greatly in recent years. But part of the problem, really, it's twofold, and I'll spend a second or two on each. One is the diminishing transparency of public office and those who hold it. And the second, on the media side, is the increase in anonymity that allows people to say almost anything they want about anyone or anything without accepting accountability on their part. So when you find that people in public life are not easily accountable, and then their critics are not easily accountable, what we end up with is the sort of cesspool of, I hate to call it a cesspool of contempt, but that's really what we have in a lot of cases. It's not always very informed And it's certainly not very civil discourse. And it's my view that we were better off, materially so, when someone like me, as a young reporter, was able to pick up the telephone and call the Honorable Rod Logan at home when he was Minister of Justice and he was an MLA for West St. John. When we had a question for Rod Logan, the Minister of Justice, we called him at home. And not only did Mr. Logan come to the phone, he often answered the phone. I even recall on occasions getting Richard Hatfield on the phone. I don't think that would happen today. And not because Blaine Higgs might not be willing to take the call, but more likely people won't let him. They won't let him take the call. He's so bubble wrapped by people who want to manage the message, that they're really afraid to let him answer the phone, let alone answer the questions. And that's the other thing I'll say, gentlemen, is that there's a heck of a difference between responding to a question and answering it. And we are in an age now, I think, a dismaying age, in which many, many people in public life, and it's not just politics, it's also business and other spheres as well, where people are responding with talking points, not answering questions. And that doesn't serve the public well, and the jig is up. The jig is up. The public has had it, and the public is not going to continue putting up with it. The public wants answers, and they want accountability.
And I think people respect you, in politicians and the public, when they were watching you and listening and responding or answering your questions, trying to, or doing one or the other, but you would try to hold our feet to the fire there, and you would push people of all political stripes to answer the question. What are you hiding? Why aren't you answering the question? You said earlier there's 2 reasons. Tell us that again, 2 reasons
well,
why.
It's pretty simple. There are only 2 reasons why someone won't answer a fair question. And that's either that they don't know the answer, or they don't want you to know. The first is acceptable. To say, I don't know, if it's honest. Now, to say, I don't know when you do know, that's a lie. So that's not acceptable. But if you actually don't know the answer to a question, I don't know is a perfectly good answer. But quite often, the reason we don't get answers from people in positions of authority is because they don't want us to know what the reasoning is or the thinking is, because maybe they're afraid of it, or they're not comfortable defending a decision, or they're afraid that there will be some political fallout from staking out an unpopular position. But here's the thing, and again, I'm speaking to people who've been there, and you know what I'm saying. If you're not willing to make decisions, and you're not willing to take responsibility for them, don't get into public life. Public life is about doing just exactly that. And if you get defeated, you get defeated. If your ideas are defeated, so what? It can't be just about getting reelected. And that's sort of what we've reduced politics to in the modern age. And if you want to know why people are cynical, I think this is one of the reasons. It can't be just about the next election. It's got to be about the next decision. And again, people willing to take responsibility irrespective of the long-term consequences.
And you've, in promoting your book on the tour, book signing tour, and also online, and in the book, Murphy's Logic, it mentions that you've interviewed over 5,000 people throughout your career. That's amazing. And some of the, I guess the quote unquote heavy hitters, people like, and we've seen some of it on the highlight reel, but Oprah and Howie Mandel, Vanna White, Randy Travis, and
Jody Carr.
Yeah, Jode.
Jody Carr.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I always tried to answer your questions.
And I always appreciate people who try to answer them.
But it's true, Jack.
No, you mentioned a lot of the celebrity crowd, and interviewing celebrities is a lot different because just because you're famous because of the Wheel of Fortune or your game show or your talk show doesn't mean that you have to subject yourself to the same rigors as a person who seeks a public office, gains public confidence, and then makes public policy. So I hold those people to a different standard, and frankly, people in celebrity roles in society aren't obliged to answer some of the tougher questions, and many of them don't, and I accept that. But it's different when you accept the mantle of leadership through a general election, or even an appointment, to the Senate, something, by the way, which I think we need to change. We need to keep the Senate, but make it elected, and make it a voice, particularly for our provinces and our region in the country. But those people, if they're going to accept the sinecure, then they need to accept the responsibility of accountability that comes with it.
And now with celebrities, because I think this would be a challenge. I've interviewed some celebrities in the past, and we've got one right on with us right now. But how do you, when it's Oprah Winfrey or Randy Travis, all these people that do, several, like hundreds of interviews a month, how do you, in your mind, to say, how can Steve Murphy be different when the lights and the cameras were on? How can I be different with my questions than what everyone else is asking? How do you do that?
That is a good question. And I'll tell you, one thing I always wanted to do before I interviewed anybody, irrespective of whether they were from the celebrity realm or public policy or business or anything, I wanted to know about them as a person first. So I would quite often ask my producer, Bill Dix, or before him, Marnie Els or Wade Keller, the people who got guests for me. I would either ask them to work up a little bit of a file on the guest, pardon me, or I would do it myself. Because if you want to know about what someone thinks, it helps if you actually know a little bit about where they come from, what their own personal context and life experience is. So I always tried to find some personal insights before delving into, you know, the movie they were talking about, or the television program, or the political issue, or what have you. Because, you know, let's not forget, at the end of the day, we're all just people marching through life, and we've had good experiences and bad. We come from, you know, sometimes dysfunctional families, small towns, big cities, but it's helpful to know some of the context from which people come. And quite often the insights that flow from that are almost more interesting than the ones that come from the more predictable questions. You know, you can ask Harrison Ford, what's it like to play Indiana Jones, but he's been asked that 150,000 times. So I asked him what it was like to work as a carpenter on the lot at Paramount Pictures, which is actually where he got his start in movies. And by the way, he had what is called, you know, perfect plumb, which is the carpenter's equivalent of perfect pitch. The guy could see right angles perfectly, and he was a master carpenter. So we actually had a little discussion about that before we get into all the flash and dash, and, you know, what's it like to have your, you know, your star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, which is all old hat to those folks, really.
Well, when people think about you, or if they've, you know, they don't maybe necessarily get opportunities like we do to be able to ask questions, but what is it that something that about you that the average person, the average viewer wouldn't know about you that's intriguing?
I mean, sure. I mean, I've really made very little secret of most of my life. I grew up in New Brunswick, and I'm a maritimer. I'm sort of a bit of a maritime nationalist. Not that I'm not a proud Canadian, but I tend to think that the Maritimes is maybe the best place in the world to live. Few better, and I don't think we've always gotten our due. So I like to bring that to the table. I was born and raised here. My family's been in the Maritimes. My mom's people, my dad's people, for hundreds of years, and my first Acadian ancestors and my first Irish ancestors came here in the mid 17th century. So, you know, we've got some long history, not compared with obviously our Indigenous people, but in terms of those who've come after. And I'm very, very proud of that. So, but I've made no secret of that. I guess if you want to know about my personal interests, I'm very interested in music. Always was raised in a musical family. My dad was a professional musician. I was a kid musician myself. In fact, I remember doing shows with Don Messer back in the day. I remember one down at the Harvey Fair down in Harvey Station back in the early 1970s with Messer and Marg Osborne and Charlie Chamberlain. And so, I mean, I did a few of those things over the years. So, I mean, I guess there are a couple of things about me that maybe people don't know, but not because I'm not willing to tell you. Right. I mean, I just did.
Well, you're an open book.
Yeah,
you're an open book.
That's quite amazing, actually, Steve. That you mean you can just drop Harvey Station, the name of Harvey Station, and those other places where you've done some time.
I remember it well because it was a huge. I mean, Harvey Station's a small place, but they had a huge fair there.
Yep.
And I remember going up there. There was a big grandstand there, big stage, and yeah, it was great. There must have, it looked to me like there were thousands of people there. Maybe it was only hundreds, but it sure felt like a lot to a 10-year-old kid. I'll tell you.
They still have the big parade in part of a fair there yet. So and out in Stanley as well, the Stanley Fair, there was a circuit. You know, there was the Boys Town Fair, the Harvey Fair, the Stanley Fair, and so on. And Gagetown Fair still goes. But I want to get back to your book. And so we do have a question from Nora Valentino. Is this your first book? And I guess the question for me, how long have you been working at that book, other than your whole life?
Fair enough. This is actually my third book. I did a book in 2000 that was sort of a look at the history of Live at 5. It was a little bit biographical only because I was involved in the program for so long. And then a few years after that, I did a sort of a bit of a memoir called Before the Camera, which looked at my life, maybe the first half of my life in the broadcasting business. And then this is the third. This is a longer book because really it's retrospective over my entire 45 years. Books are interesting, guys, because the first thing you need is an idea for a book. Then you have to sit down with a publisher who wants to build on the idea, which my publisher, Nimbus has been my publisher for all three of my books. A great maritime publisher, by the way, and I know we've got good ones all over. Goose Lane's another great one, but Nimbus is mine. And you gotta get the sign off on an idea, and then you got to start writing. So from inspiration through perspiration, it was about 13 months from the time I had the idea to the time I picked up a copy of the book.
Now, show us the cover of the book there. You held it up. You do have one of the rare copies that are seen at this moment.
Well, fortunately, it's sold very well, so there will be books in the stores by the end of the week.
Yeah.
But this is me and my son over here. Yeah. That's the cover of the book.
But that is outstanding. You're pretty much, if not are, sold out throughout Atlantic Canada. Their first run was successful, completely sold out. Like you said, you've got the second run coming probably by the end of the week in bookstores.
It should be in the stores. I think by Friday was the date that they were giving me as of yesterday. So hopefully that holds.
Well, like I said, just briefly, I went to Chapters in Fredericton, and I'm looking around, walk in, and I see a lot of local New Brunswick, Atlantic Canadian books, but Steve Murphy's not there. I'm like, where's Steve Murphy? If I get around here and he's not here, and then eventually went to the counter, and they said that you're sold out, and more books are arriving very soon. So anyway, that's great.
Now, Steve, you talked about public policy and the accountability of politicians. People want to know: are you ready to throw your hat in the ring and go to the other side and serve in public, serve the public in another way through elected politics?
Yeah, no, there's a real easy answer to that, and the answer is no. I've got great respect for people who opt for public life, and contrary to what some people may think, most of the people I've known in high political office I like. And I mean, I like them personally. I don't necessarily agree with them on every aspect of their policy, but I think most of them are likable people who get in it for the right reason. But I did toy with the idea when I was a much younger person of running for political office. But I decided after I got into the journalism business, and particularly the long form interview business, that I think that I had maybe more enjoyable role doing what I was doing, and so that accountability piece from the outside sort of looking in, but not because I don't respect what goes on in public life. I just think that part of the give and take of public policy should involve journalists holding political leaders and business leaders and others accountable. So no, that's something that I decided I wouldn't pursue, but I do, and I say this not to curry any favor, but I do have great regard for most of the people I've encountered in public life who I honestly think get in for the right reason. That maybe some of them don't come out as they went in, but I think a good many of them do. And I think that it's unfortunate that we maybe as a society become so dismissive of the political class. Having said that, if political leaders would be a little more forthright with the answers, get rid of the talking points, speak to people honestly and be accountable and answer your own phone calls, I think that politicians could largely redeem, I don't want to call it the profession because it shouldn't be a profession, but they could certainly redeem the work of politicians.
Well, I know us three, we've enjoyed public life. We've been able to make some change, not all change. We can't change everything, but sometimes the little battles add up to big battles and victories that way, and we've enjoyed it. And although I've never been on your set or questioned by you, and I don't think Jack, but Jody probably has.
I always loved it. At first, it was a great compliment.
A few times I can recall, Jody.
Yes, a great compliment to be asked to be on, and also, I don't know, it's just a great experience to get the questions from Steve and try to meet the challenge of his questions. It was always good.
And I remember driving you to the studio. I was Jody's EA for a little bit of a time there for 4 years when he was the Minister of Education.
Yeah, we'd leave.
We'd be rushing down there, and we'd have to be on our game. We knew Steve was asking questions, but
well, and it was the number one, maybe still is the number one news program watched in Atlantic Canada. So it was a great opportunity to connect with viewers and voters and constituencies to get the message and the clarification or whatever on the point. So it was a,
and and some people did better than others when it came to connecting with viewers. I mean, I don't want to dismiss all politicians and all political interviews. Some people do a very good, competent interview, and the answers are sometimes very forthright. And I think that people respect that because, and McKenna was a very good example of this when Frank McKenna was Premier of New Brunswick. And McKenna got a reputation, even among people who didn't necessarily vote for him or his party, that they didn't always agree with him, but they respected the fact that he said what he thought and he did what he said he was going to do, including walking away on the 10th anniversary.
Yeah.
And you know, he's never going to be forgotten for that because it doesn't happen that often in politics, which goes to show the value of doing it. Do what you say you're going to do. People will respect you, even if they don't agree with you.
And would you say he was one of the better or one of the best, I guess, politicians on your broadcast if you were asking questions? Or would you have a best that you could point to?
Well, I would hold up McKenna's approach as being among the best, and I think that McKenna was always a very satisfying interview because he generally found a way to answer the question, even if it was to say something like, I don't know, I won't tell you, can't tell you. And I remember one time he said to me, I know what you want me to say, but I'm not going to say that. To me, that kind of approach is way more earnest than talking points and spin. Which I call in the book, you know, spin, loopholes, and damned lies. And people know them when they see them.
Well, and then
the public is not fooled by this stuff anymore, if they ever were.
Well, and then as well as if they said they're not going to answer, and you may also say, well, tell me why you're not answering, and then they'll answer that too. So.
Completely so. And that is a perfectly good question, by the way. If someone says, I'm not going to answer, say, well, why not?
Well, you would
That's when somebody might say, well, because it's subject to litigation, or because it's a personnel matter, or because we haven't got the final figures. Sure. Always be prepared to answer why.
And you would, and if they weren't answering the question, I would remember you often saying, why aren't you answering the question? You would say, why aren't you answering the question?
The new tactic, by the way, is to answer questions that aren't being asked, which is, you know, irrespective of the question, say the following. I said to the Honourable Aaron O'Toole during the last federal election, Mr. O'Toole, you just answered a question I didn't ask. But the public sees through that kind of thing too, right? The public is way smarter than spin.
I think I might have witnessed that this week, a question period, actually. Sometimes we get mixed up, though, when we're answering our questions.
Sometimes it's legitimate. Sometimes it's legitimate.
Sure. It is. It takes a lot of practice to answer questions sometimes when you want to answer the question and then spin or pivot to what you want other people to hear
on that topic
and add on to it. It does take some practice.
It's a bit of a dance, eh? It's a bit of in all sincerity.
But you can do both. You can answer the question and then spin to what else you want to add to
Just
it.
a little bit of,
Sure. Until Steve cuts you off. Until Steve really cuts you off and says, okay, no, let's go back to
I
that.
agree with all the points you made. And I can't argue with your firsthand experience. So,
well, we practice it a lot.
What about some of the things you're doing right now? You got the book tour that's finishing up. You did some signings. Do you have speaking engagements? Are you?
I do some of that. I'm still, of course, doing the Murphy's Logic pieces on CTV every other week. So that's probably 25 or almost 25 to 30 pieces a week, and I'm doing some analysis and commentary on other things as well. So that kind of keeps my toe in the water, you know, in the newsroom just enough. And then beyond that, I've continued to do the public speaking and a lot of the charity work that I did during my career, because I've always thought that it was more or less the duty of citizens to give back in ways like that. So I've tried to continue doing that, and that's what brings us to Christmas Daddies again this weekend. So
Christmas Daddies this weekend, exactly.
That's great.
And
we were, actually, the last time Jack and I saw you in person was at the Bobby's Hospice dinner in St. John a few years back, and we sat at a table with you, and Deputy Mayor Shirley McAlery was with us.
Well, and Shirley is instrumental in that organization. And of all the things I've been involved with, that's one of the ones of which I'm proudest, because St. John was the first community in Atlantic Canada to build a residential hospice. And it was built from the ground up. The public raised the money. I was part of the capital campaign that raised the money to build that building. And then we convinced government, and it was bipartisan. It was Sean Graham was on board, David Allward was on board with the financing piece, the operational piece. And you know, I don't know whether everybody in New Brunswick realizes that St. John really led the way in Atlantic Canada when it came to residential hospice. So I think it's something to be very proud of.
Good.
That is great.
Oh, geez, we could talk all night.
I know. We've expanded those hospices to many cities in the province now.
Because of the St. John Hospice.
Moncton, Fredericton, and because of St. John.
Hospice,
I know. It's a great model. Wonderful model.
It is.
Well, Jack?
Well, we could talk all night. We could talk all night, and we really want to thank you for taking the time that you've taken already for us and our viewers.
Pleasure.
And we'd love to have you on again maybe next year, and to see any of the new projects that you have on the go, and anything else you'd like to part with.
Yeah, no, I just want to, thanks for the opportunity, really appreciate it. And as I say, The sweet part of Christmas Daddies for me, which is my sort of focus for the rest of this week, is on helping kids. And Christmas Daddies came on in 1964, and one thing that hasn't changed since then is that we still have child poverty to deal with. But fortunately, we also have willing communities that are there to help.
Well, it's great that even in retirement, Steve, that you're willing to continue to give back to Christmas Daddies and many other organizations in New Brunswick and Atlantic Canada. So thank you for being on, and all the best for Christmas Daddies coming up and the book tour, the book launch, because the first print has sold out, but by the end of the week, viewers can be able to pick up their copy of Murphy's Logic at their local bookstore, and we wish you all the best in that second and third print.
Thanks very much, guys. Merry Christmas to you all.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you.
Stephen.
Merry
Thank you.
Christmas
Merry
to you, too.
Christmas. And with that, we'll say goodnight to Steve and to our viewers. And I'm Jack.
And I'm Jeff.
And I'm Jody. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Good night, guys.
Good night, Steve.